be on our best behavior, guys. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
Hello.
Hello, Arvind. I think
Yeah,
he's
just
muted.
here.
Arvind, hi.
Is he muted? Yeah, he's muted. You have to unmute. Okay.
Yeah, hi.
Okay. Hi. 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 So I'll just give a quick intro. So Arvind is SRF at PRL Ahmedabad. He works on comets. So I asked him for some doubts. So Arvind, hi. These people, on my spare time, we try to learn a bit of astronomy.
Okay.
So they are all inclined towards astronomy. They are all willing to learn few things. So we were
Okay.
just talking about DS9 and how we can use DS9 to visualize things.
Okay.
And I don't use DS9 much, but I've seen you use DS9 quite nicely. So
Uh-huh.
hopefully you can give a good demo of what DS9 can do, like plot a few things on DS9 and show them.
Yeah, actually, talking about DS9, it is a very powerful tool. Actually, many people even do their entire work in DS9. Like, if you have a crowded field, like what do you say, a star forming region or something like that, then people plot contour plots over this. So, contour plot is what is called the intensity plot. So, contours are made in areas where there is more intensity, or they give certain parameters such that it is plotting a contour in each places. So that can give you information about which are the regions in those molecular clouds which possesses this star forming capacity, like which regions can be potential star forming regions. For I don't do such works actually. I use DS9 mostly as a visualizing tool. So, like Jishnu said, I work on comets, spectroscopy, photometry, polarimetry, etc. So we do take observations from using our 1.2 meter telescope in Guru Shigar. So while reduction of these cometry spectra, we need to visualize these 2D FITS files and then reduce them into 1D one dimensional spectrum, and then apply many calibrations to it, like wavelength calibration, flux calibrations, etc. But maybe I can show you some small demo on how to use this line plot, etc., and what are the things which I know you can do with a DS9.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
maybe I'll share a screen. Okay, so is it visible?
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Okay. So basically, what I said in IRAF is this one, IRAF, and this is DS9. So what we do is we open DS9 from this particular window, and if you just want to display something, so this is a default image that is present in IRAF. So it asks which frame do you want to plot it. If I say this, it plots a galaxy. It's a spiral galaxy. So this is a basic default. Like if you want to test if your DS9 is working, just through IRAF. So you just install IRAF, DS9, etc., and you say display Dave $pics, and it displays this particular thing. So if I want to, like in my case, I take cometry spectrum, it's sky spectrum, etc. So maybe at times I do want to blink things, blink certain frames and see. So what I do is, for in this example, I can show display Dave pics one. If I do, it will display it in the first frame. Display the pics 2, it will display it in the second frame. Now I can actually blink them. It is actually blinking. Since it is the same thing, you cannot understand it is blinking. You can see here that it is going frame 1, frame 2, frame 1, frame 2. So to know the difference, maybe I can show you something. So this maybe exclamation mark is given so that the control goes to the original terminal. From the original terminal, I give DS9 for the DS9 to open. But since I'm inside the IRAF terminal, now I should give an exclamation so that the control goes to the system. Now an ampersand sign is used so that I can continue using my terminal, or else the terminal freezes until I closes that particular application. So now
The previous one was a single FITS file, or was it?
it's a single fix file.
What is a FIT file?
Sorry?
Okay.
What's a
FITS file is a format where most astronomical images are stored. Like you have PNG, JPEG.
And I think it carries a lot of data, right? Especially in its.
It's
Yeah, more.
basically photons.
Yeah.
Like photons, which is converted to the ADU units, the electrical units of the CCD. So this is a comet spectrum. These are whatever you see are molecular emissions due to fluorescence efficiency. So basically, when the comets approach sun, whatever ice is present in it starts sublimating. So you see a emission spectra over it. Now, in order to show you the difference, blinking thing. So this is its sky spectrum. So these are skylines basically, which is 5575 oxygen line. This is 6300 oxygen line in angstroms. So now I have two frames. If I say next, it shows this frame. If I say, so suppose one is zoomed in and the other one is zoomed out. Now if I start blinking, you cannot compare them. It will be too very difficult to blink. So what I do now is I go to frame. Now I go to match. Then I say frame and image. So the moment I press this, the next one will get matched to this one. Whichever FITS file frame you are in, if you perform this frame, match, frame, image, then it matches all the other. Suppose you have 100 FITS file opened in this, all of them will get matched to this particular orientation, this particular zoom. So suppose now this one I need a different scale. Sin H, I don't know.
Can you just explain once more what you mean by all the images get matched to this one?
So basically that is what I'm saying. One second. So you can see two frames here. This is my comet frame and next is a sky frame.
Okay.
So basically what I have to do here is, if I start blinking it here, you can see this particular line is common in both.
Okay.
So this is what I am subtracting when I'm taking a sky frame. So now what I need to see is if all those skylines are matching, if there is any horizontal shift between the lines in cometary spectra as well as sky spectra.
Okay.
If there is any shift in the spectra, once I subtract them, what happens is, instead of this line, instead of this particular line getting subtracted, it will still be visible and there will be another black line over here since I subtracted it from the wrong region.
Okay.
So now I need to compare if they are exactly matching. So what I do is I zoom into that particular line. Now once I zoom, it is difficult for me to fix this. Where did I zoom it? Which area did I fix it? So now I go to this. Now I take frame, match, frame, image. Now you see it's in the exact same zooming area. So suppose you have different frames where there are multiple stars or something like that, or sometimes what happens is we take photometry of you know photometry, right?
Yeah.
So when we take photometry of comets, all the stars remains constant, but the comet keeps on moving if we start stacking them, because if we are tracking comet, then star keeps trailing. So what we do is we stack all these images and then blink between them to see if it is stacking properly. So now I need to zoom into that particular comet and fix at that position. This is impossible. Now since it is 2 frames, I can even do manually instead of doing this. But when it is 100 frames, I cannot go to each frame, click it, frame, match. Even I can match the scale, axis order, binning, crosshair, smoothing, everything can be matched. So sometimes what happens is when I open an image, it will be in min max. If I show min max, I don't know. So this is another particular scaling. It is not visible here, but sometimes when it is this scaling, you will not be able to see anything. So in all those 100 frames, I need to put Z scale in order to get such an image. Now I cannot go to each frame and do scale, Z scale, scale, Z scale. So what I do is put it for one frame, then say frame match, frame image, and all the 100 frames gets matched to that particular thing. Or for scaling, I scale the all the matching is done with scale. So now all the 100 image gets matched to that particular scale. Now
Can you repeat once again what you mean by scaling,
so
or
scaling is simply
why we
yeah
do
scaling is
Z
simply
scale?
so suppose if you have a very bright star, very bright star. Now if I do in this case, I will not be able to show, but suppose if I have a very bright star and I do Z scale, your entire CCD, the exposure on the entire CCD will be seen. It will be seen very bright. But if I do min max, then what happens is only the pixels where the light is most concentrated, that is the 3 pixel, the sampling area, that will be highlighted. So
Okay.
mostly it is used when you want to see if your PSF is good, or if you want to see the light is getting focused in a particular fashion, or if it is distorted or something like that. You just do min max and you see that it is okay, falling on 3 pixel, 4 pixel, 5 pixel, like that. But the moment you do Z scale, it gets spread into all the pixel. Wherever light was there, overexposed or anything, it will get visible. So in order to show the plotting, so now suppose I want to take a quick look at this. If suppose I want to get the spectrum of this, I will need to do multiple procedures like flat fielding, bias subtraction, sky subtraction, cosmic ray correction, etc. But now what I want to do is I just need to take a quick look at the spectrum. So what I do is I go to edit, I say this is none, I say region. So now the region is ticked. Now I go to region, shape. Shape will be circle by default. You press line. Now click wherever you want the line to be drawn and draw it across your spectrum. Now there is a line drawn. Everybody is able to see a green line, right?
Yes.
So this green line, now just double click this green line, double click it, and a pop-up window comes up. Now you go to analysis, it says plot 2D. I say plot 2D. It will give me a spectrum where I can zoom in. It's not calibrated.
I think if you just move the line a little above or below, we'll have a better.
The thing is not calibrated. That is why it is giving a very bad.
Okay.
So this one is a calibrated comet spectrum. The one I showed in the beginning was a raw spectrum. Whatever you get directly from the telescope into the spectrograph, that was shown. It contains skylines, etc. But this one is flat fielded, bias subtracted, sky corrected, cosmic ray corrected, and now it is ready for the spectrum to be extracted. So now if I want to just see the thing, I say region, line, double click it.
Arvind, I think if you move the line a little above or below the central,
That will change.
yeah.
The flux is too high.
Okay, yeah, that's what. So I think they get the idea, right? I mean,
So here you can see the different molecular emissions. So this is what is basically the composition of a cometary spectrum. The left end one is CN molecule, then C2, C3, etc. So the main thing is you just put a line. Since this is very bright, that is why this was getting overshooting. That in the middle it is overshooting. So once you bring it here, now you can see the cometary spectra, or else if you want. So you are asking me what is min max, right? So this is a standard star spectrum. Now this is in min max. So now only the brightest points are being seen. But the moment you put Z scale, it gets more brighter. Like wherever you have extra photons also, it gets visible. But once you say min max, only the brightest points are visible. So you can see if it is properly focused or dispersed or something like that. So you say region, line, this is a standard star spectrum. Basically this one. So that one had some extra cosmic ray in this particular area. That is why it was overshooting. So this is a standard star spectrum. Now this is basically used to do a flux calibration because this is already studied. So you can get your instrument response from this and then calibrate your comet flux to get it in ergs per centimeter square plus per second per angstrom. So then you are ready to do your science with the spectra, or else it is all raw. Everything else is a raw data. Once you do all this, then you are ready to extract the flux from it and then calculate different things of the comet. So basically, I'm working in comet. That is why I'm talking everything in terms of comet. Sorry for that.
What are these lines exactly?
Sorry.
These lines, what do they represent exactly? The
It is just
photon?
it is just the counts per pixel. It is not
you can
photons
think
basically.
of it as a spectrum, I think.
It is not a photon. It basically the photon falls on the CCD and it converts it into, like, it will have some particular gain. So one photon falls and then ideally it should create one electron, but it doesn't create that because no CCD is 100% efficient. So when maybe
I think he does not know that much technical knowledge.
Okay.
I think he is not very like from academic background. So if you can simplify, I think he would understand it better.
Okay, it is simply that suppose you keep what do you say? It is raining and you keep 10 buckets in front in the rain. Each bucket will be collecting rain in a different manner. You cannot say everything will collect it in the same way.
Yeah.
Now you take a histogram plot of how much level water is there. That is your spectrum.
Okay.
So this x-axis is representing my dispersion axis. That is from 0 pixel to 1000 pixel. and my y-axis is counts. So my first pixel contains this much pixel counts. Second 100 pixel contains this much photons or electrons. So basically, it is just a plot, pixel versus counts. Now, actually talking about DS9, like I said, it is very powerful because when you have a star, it is used for photometry. Like using IRAF, when you do photometry, you have a module in IRAF called photometry. What was it called?
I'm sorry,
It is
the
called-
thing you did before where you double clicked it and you saw the spectrum. So is that
Yeah,
a
yeah.
specific tool that is able to provide the histogram, the spectrum? What is it exactly called?
It is not a tool actually. It is simply what it is doing is you can see the line going through the spectrum actually. So what it is doing is it is just plotting whatever value is in that pixel versus that particular pixel. Like
Okay.
here you can see here this is the here you can see the x and y pixel, okay, and here you will see the number of counts. So when I place it here, it says 53 in x-axis, 264 in y-axis, and the counts are 1346. So it is simply plotting this x-axis versus that value.
So it's something like intensity value
Yeah.
for that particular pixel.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is just for visualizing the spectra. Basically, we have to add all these rows, like whatever is there inside the spectrum, we have to add them in the spatial direction. This is the x-axis is the dispersion axis, y-axis is the spatial axis. So you have to put an aperture which can accept all the photons falling in the CCD so that you get the best spectrum. This is just a visualization. So in the similar way, like now I added this one. Similar way, actually, I can, if suppose it was a star, a single star, doing photometry, I can select circle and it will give me a circle. Now place it on the star. Suppose this is a single star. Place it on the star. Okay, I can actually show it in a different way. So this is a comet in the guider of my spectrograph. So this is how a comet looks like. It has a fuzzy thing, whereas a star will be having a defined boundary. So that is how you differentiate between a comet and a star. So now, if suppose I want to see how many counts are, if I keep moving the mouse over this, I will see only pixel to pixel values, but I need to know the entire total count of the photons. So I take circle, edit region, I place a circle which can actually get most of the counts. Again, I double click it, analysis, statistics. That gives me what is the total sum of the photons inside it, what is the sigma, what is the area of pixel inside it, what is the median, mean, minimum, maximum, standard deviation, RMS value, everything is given. So this is basically used in photometry. You need standard deviation, RMS value, median value, sum value, etc. for calculating the magnitude, the error values of the magnitudes, etc. So this is used when you are doing photometry. Then there are many literally many applications, like you can add your astrometric files. Like if you want to know the RADEC of the files, RADEC, you people are familiar with RADEC?
Yeah.
So if suppose you need to know, like if you have a very concentrated field and you need to know the RADEC of this particular star, then you load it into astrometry, you get a WCS file, but you cannot simply visualize it. So you can load it into DS9 and then there will be another column here telling RA and DEC. So you place your mouse wherever you want and you will get the RADEC value.
So it converts XY values into the coordinate system values?
Yeah, so the astrometry.net, that is an online software.
Okay.
that actually what it does is, if you have a crowded field, or at least you should have 3 or 4 bright stars which it can identify. So then if suppose you give if you know the RA deck already, which area you are observing, and if you provide that RA deck, even if you don't provide it, it will go through all the database, the entire database it has of the sky. It will start matching your particular star, the like arrangement of the stars, and start matching it with that particular database it has. Then it will get that field, apply all those RA deck into this. It is a solution is applied into this. So basically, for every X and Y, you get a corresponding RA deck. Maybe later on Vishnu will be able to explain this more, because he has literally written a Python code over it. So then another thing that can be done is you can create BVR frames. Like this is new frame RGB. So I cannot show it right now, because suppose you have a image in red filter, green filter, and blue filter. There are different filters for photometry, and you need to create a fabulous image of a galaxy, molecular cloud, or something, a supernovae or something like that. You take images in red filter, green filter, blue filter, add them to this DS9 in this order, and then apply some energy filters, etc. And you will be actually literally able to create an image which you see. You have heard of astrophotography, right?
Yes, yes.
So literally you will be able to recreate an image, like how you can actually visualize it, how you are. So basically your eyes is sensitive to blue, green, and red. So when you add these 3 colors, you get the natural color of how the sky is looking like. So like how it will be visible in DS9, using a DSLR. DSLR has color pixel, that is why you see a color image, but CCD doesn't have color pixel. So what you do is put a red filter, take the red photons, put a green filter, take the green photons, put a blue filter, take the blue photons, then arrange them in a particular fashion, stack them in a particular fashion, so that you get the original color out of it.
So the color filtering comes because of wavelength recognition, like.
Yeah. So basically, you have to give it. It just loads the FITS file into this. Now you have to say, my red filter is this particular energy, blue filter is this particular energy, green filter is this particular energy. So now you can keep do a trial and error, mix and match, and get a very beautiful image.
Cool.
That's it. Like more about DS9. If you have any doubt, then maybe you can ask.
I think within scale, the logarithmic scale and the difference between that and the others, can you mention? Because the logarithmic is the one that is easily visualizable for us, right? Like the human eye is C and log.
Yeah, but basically, just to view the FITS file, we actually use this, what you say, Z scale. Now, when you want to see the different, like, what you say, the intensity variation inside this particular comet, because this is all wide scale. Z scale is wide scale. Now, if you say log scale, it goes into a different, like, noise will be more. In the log scale, noise will be more. In min-max, only the central portion will be more visible. Now, if you say power, it keeps on varying. It is like, we don't use this much. Mostly photometry, yeah, or people who do molecular fields or something like that does this. We don't actually play with these things.
And are the corrections applied before you load it into DS9, or is it more of some preliminary viewing thing? Do you usually perform the CCD corrections before?
No, it's basically a visualizing tool. So in many observatories, like in my observatory itself, there is another instrument which does spectroscopy as well as photometry. So it has a CCD, and once the observation is done, it directly shows the image in a DS9.
Oh, okay.
So there are many other viewers also, many other literally many softwares which actually does this particular viewing FITS file thing. But DS9 is actually clubbed with many standard softwares. Like IRAF is a very old software, and DS9 works very smoothly with this. And DS9 works smoothly with many other softwares also. So basically, people prefer DS9 to do enormous amount of jobs.
Does DS9 support multiple imaging I mean, if you want to work on two FITS files, or is it usually
Yeah.
designed for a single?
If I click here and if I click here and press enter, now it will open a DS9 image. Oh, it's open. Usually in this system there is some problem. Usually it opens in a single frame actually.
I think you are using a virtual machine, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
Here. Oh, this one is also some, don't know, some other issues there. Okay, this is still in the virtually.
Could you tell us a bit more about your work, perhaps? Like, is it more towards spectroscopy, or?
Yeah, so basically what I do is main work is spectroscopy of comets or asteroids. And I also do photometry is very it is of not much of use in comets because you don't need to know the color magnitude, color diagram or color or magnitudes, or because it is already, once a comet starts coming into the solar system, inner solar system, all those will be recorded by amateur astronomers, and many sites, many pan stars, many other telescopes will start doing photometry of this. So it is brightening, this is this magnitude, it is this magnitude. That is already done. But what we do is we put a spectrograph. So you know spectrograph?
Yeah, we are familiar with it.
So basically we have a spectrograph which has a grating inside it. It has 300 lines per mm.
Okay, 300.
So what it does is it's 300 lines per mm. So if you need a higher resolution, that a particular number of lines are increased in the spectrograph. So my spectrograph resolution is 1000. So what it means is delta lambda by lambda is 1000. So at 6000 wavelength, I'll get what do you say, like 5000, I'll get 5 angstrom. No, then lambda by delta lambda square.
Delta lambda being the difference of wavelength between, okay,
Each pixel.
each pixel.
Yeah. So basically it is the resolving power. So if you have a higher resolution, you will be able to split the lines. Basically, when I showed you the spectrum, it is a very low resolution spectrum. So the CN line, C2 line, C3 line, it has enormous number of lines inside it also.
But
So-
what is the detail you need in order to be able to make like scientific inferences? What is the resolution you need?
It depends. Like I can do an entire thesis with low resolution also, but once I move into high resolution, I'll be able to talk about the different vibrational rotational lines present inside that particular band, the vibrational temperature present at that particular time of the observation, the physical properties of the comets, etc. Like if I go into very high resolution like 60,000, then I'll be even able to say talk about the isotopic ratios. So isotopic ratios, if I start studying, then I'll be able to match those isotopic ratios with the initial stages of the solar system formation, and I'll be able to say this particular comet could be formed in this particular era of the evolution of the solar system.
Wow.
Because comets are basically remnants of the solar system. When it was formed, planets were formed, all the other debris were formed, and these debris which were found in the outer solar system turned out to be a comet.
This is like a basic question, but when you're using photometry for comets, unlike stars, in
Yeah.
stars the light is actually telling you about the internal structure, right? I mean, it's telling you a lot of information. But in comets, they're not exactly luminous. So how are you able to derive that much information from something derived from photometry?
From
Or
comets with what do you say, photometry, what you will be able to derive is only the color of the material. Like if you do BVRI photometry and you do B minus V, R minus I, V minus R, these things will give the color of the particular comet.
okay.
So that actually you can match them with various other comets which is well studied, or you can match it with sun's values. Even sun has particular values, like redder means B, R minus I value will be higher, like that. So the only inference you can get is actually it is a redder material or a bluer material. What type of material is present inside it? What can be the size of the grains present inside these comets to give such a reflection, etc. Something like that.
Okay.
Because there is nothing like for if you study blazars, stars, variable stars, etc. You do photometry. You do exactly just photometry to study the entire star, like you said.
Yeah.
You keep on doing photometry, and you see the what do you say, the variation in the photons, and you infer many things like the variation, the pulse variation of that particular thing. Or suppose you want to study exoplanets, then you keep on studying a star which has a potential planet revolving around it. You just do photometry, then you plot a light curve. You will get a dip if a planet is there. From the width of the dip, the depth of the dip, you will be able to infer many enormous amount of details about the planets.
Correct. Uday, you have a question?
No, not as such. So, can we just determine the velocity of that
The
any
comet.
asteroid or something like comet or asteroid using that data?
Yeah, for velocity, if it is for star, then what
Yeah.
you do
So
is you
using photometry, so we can we calculate the redshift of it or something like that?
using spectroscopy.
Yeah, spectroscopy.
Yeah, using spectroscopy, what you do is, so for that you need high resolution. So
Yeah.
because in low resolution, like I said, since the variation of wavelength between two pixels is very large, like 3 angstrom, 5 angstrom, all the variation due to this Doppler shift will be blend into each other. There you will not be able to literally see any shift in wavelength. So
Yeah.
once you go into high resolution, then you are talking in decimals of angstrom in per pixel.
Yeah. Yeah.
0.1 angstrom per pixel, 0.05 angstrom per pixel. So now, if suppose a star, like, how did you determine that star is moving away from us, like universe is expanding, or some star is wobbling, or something like that? So you do this high resolution spectroscopy. Then what happens is, if a star is wobbling, like if it contains, so like I said, photometry is done to do exoplanet only if the planet is in your line of sight. Only if the planet is crossing the star in your line of sight, then you will be able to do photometry and get a dip and then study the planet. If
Correct.
suppose the star planet is moving out of line, you are only seeing the star all the time. You cannot see the planet at all.
Yeah.
Then what happens is you do the RV method, radial velocity method. So what radial velocity method does is, when two masses are rotating, then of course it rotates around the center of mass.
Yeah.
So since the star is very huge, the center of mass of the two bodies will be inside the star but away from the center of the star.
Yeah.
So the planet keeps on rotating around the star, but the star will be wobbling around that particular center of mass.
Yeah.
So now you do high resolution spectroscopy of that particular star, then you will see whenever the star is moving towards you in that particular frame of reference, then there will be a blue shift.
Yeah.
When the star moves away from you, there will be a red shift. So from that moment, you will be able to get the what is the corresponding mass which is causing this wobbling.
Yeah.
Right.
Correct. Yeah.
So
we have calculated for the binary system, right?
yeah,
Using the radial velocity.
yeah, that's it.
There's no way we
That's it.
calculated. Yeah.
Yeah. And for comet, when you do high resolution, Doppler shift is a correction we apply, because using Doppler shift, we don't imply anything. What we do is when we observe a comet, it is coming towards you or moving away from us. So there will be, of course, a radial shift of wavelength in the spectrum. So you take the velocity, heliocentric velocity of that particular comet at that particular time, and apply
Yeah.
that Doppler correction to that spectrum, and then the lines will fall back to the original area. Because in high resolution, like I said, since it is decimals of angstrom per pixel, it is very important to calibrate it to the perfection, best perfection, so as to identify the rotational lines, because the high resolution catalog of comets are extensive. Like you have thousands and 10,000s of lines in that catalog, so you should cross match all those lines with your high resolution to say that you have this particular rotational line in your comet. For that, you need your comet to be perfectly matched to the decimal angstrom. So for that, you need to apply this Doppler shift in the high resolution spectrum.
What wavelength are you usually observing in when you're looking at?
I do it in the optical range, like 3,700 to 7,300.
And all of this light is reflected light, right, from the sun?
No, it is fluorescence emission. The ice is sublimating due to photo dissociation,
Okay.
and then it is emitting light. Like
Oh, okay, I didn't
yeah.
know.
Reflected light is there. Reflected light is also there, that we use to study the dust particles.
Yeah.
So the sunlight goes into the comet, it gets reflected and scattered from the dust particles, and creates a continuum of your comet, which is a solar spectrum basically. And up on top of that, you will get a what do you say, a emission spectrum. Like I can show you as well. So this particular shape you see, that is a solar spectrum, which is coming directly due to the reflection of the sunlight from the dust particles. And all these lines, all these peaks which are seen, this one is CN, this is C3, C2, C2, oxygen line 6300. Then this is another oxygen line, NH2 emissions are there. So now we start flux calibrating it, then study what is the production rate, like how much molecules are produced per second, and then we start implying this much material is there in it. So if for this much material to present, then what would have been the condition in the solar system, etc. And using this oxygen line, once we do a perfect sky subtraction using this 6300 oxygen line, we can actually get a implication of what amount of water is there, water ice is there in that comet. So you can actually talk about the possibility of those comet bringing ice, water to Earth, because water shouldn't have been there in Earth if not asteroids or comets brought to Earth.
So what does the peaks represent actually? Is it what is the peaks? This peaks in the graph represents actually. So is that the density of the dust particles around some point?
No,
is
no,
that like that?
it is the molecules emission. Like once you convert it into ergs per centimeter square, that says this much amount of flux is coming from this particular molecule.
Okay, okay.
Even this particular line, this is CN line. This is
yeah.
a combination of multiple vibrational and rotational lines.
Okay.
So since this is low resolution, all of them blend together and give you one peak. But if I go into 30,000 resolution, you will start seeing P branch, R branch. You might have studied about these things, right? In like it comes in emission spectroscopy chapter. It is like you will have Q branch. You see a double peak here, right?
Okay, okay.
So it is basically a P branch and R branch getting blended together due to low resolution and giving you a single peak.
Okay, okay, yeah.
Once you go into high resolution, you will be able to see single lines corresponding to particular rotation levels.
Okay.
So fluorescence is observable in the visible spectrum.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay, so if someone was doing a radio study of comets, would they actually see anything? Are there any long wavelength?
Yes, radio. This these things, these whatever emission you see, those are the daughter products of those actual material present in the comets. The actual material can be HCN or something else, NH2, CH2CN, something like that. So once UV light from the sun falls on these materials, these gets photo dissociated and then forms daughter or daughter like double daughter products, granddaughter products, and those are the things which you see actually in this particular visible range. But if you want to study the direct parent molecule, what is the parent molecule present in the comet, then you need to go into higher wavelength, that is radio. So once you go into radio, you will be able to directly measure amount of water, amount of NH2, amount of HCN present in it directly.
Okay.
If I want to do from this particular spectrum, then I'll have to study this flux, then model it and extrapolate backwards. Like if I have this emission, then what should have been the parent molecule to give me this much emission?
Okay, got it.
In infrared, you will get another emissions. In UV, you will get different types of emission. In visible, you will get these emissions.
So this is actually more of a complex process, right? When you have to kind of do the backward.
Yeah, that modeling is a very complex process because you have to recreate a natural laboratory, which is a comet. So you have to write complex codes after, like you have to create a comet in your code. Like if this much material is there, if this much material is there, then this much flux is produced. Like that, you will have to do a very large amount of trial and error, modeling, fitting, etc., and then reach a fixed model. Modeling people take lots of time to reach a particular solid model, but once you reach that, then you rule this field. Basically, you rule this field, because if you know to model these emissions, then whatever value, suppose I publish a paper using this data, these modeling people can actually take my data and then work on it and say that whatever I published is wrong because this much emission cannot be possible with this much parent molecule. So they just rule this field if you know modeling.
So the chemistry of it decides everything, like the visible spectrum observations are.
Modeling is fully chemistry.
Okay. Cool. Any more questions from anybody else? So some of us are doing data-driven astronomy. It's a course on Coursera.
Okay.
So we are learning the basics of like stacking and so on. And with Jishnu, we are working on Cepheid variable data sets.
Yeah.
But if you can maybe send us some links to open data regarding comets, at least the photometry part or something simple that other students could work on, it would be helpful.
Okay. I'll talk with Vishnu and then I'll see what can be provided. I'll talk.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
again, I would like to thank Arvind so much because I gave him like 5 minutes of notice and he jumped on the call.
So one last question before we
Yeah.
conclude. So flux is a function of distance, right? So how can you just take distance into the factor actually? So how far the comet is? Yeah.
Yes. So that is all recorded actually. Once a comet starts coming into the inner solar system, you will get details regarding what is the current heliocentric distance, what is the geocentric distance, what is the heliocentric velocity, what everything you need, you will get it from the from a site called JPL Horizons.
JPL Horizon. Okay.
Yeah. Once you get that, now what you do is for a particular epoch. Suppose today I am observing a comet. I know what is the heliocentric distance, heliocentric velocity, etc., and every single thing of that particular comet. Now I got a spectrum. Now I extract the flux. Like now I get that there are 2.4 into like something like 10⁻12 ergs per centimeter square per angstrom per second of CN flux in my comet. Now, in order to convert this particular flux into production rate, like you said, the factors of heliocentric distance, velocity, fluorescence efficiency, etc., comes adding up, because then it is a complex process, because you need to consider the heliocentric velocity, heliocentric distance, upon which the fluorescence efficiency of that molecule changes.
Exactly, exactly.
So the farther the comet, the lesser will be the fluorescence efficient. The closer the comet,
Yeah.
the more will the fluorescence efficiency.
Hmm.
So based on that, you get those values also from internet, or you can actually get the basic values. So these values actually varies with square of heliocentric distance for some values, or r raised to -2 for some values. So based upon that, you just calculate it.
So we just compare this values, right?
Ah,
We get these values and we just compare about the that heliocentric distance or velocity.
yeah. So I calculate the molecular production rate, that is number of molecules produced per second for
Yeah.
multiple epochs, like multiple
Yeah.
epochs in the sense multiple heliocentric distance.
Okay, okay,
So
okay.
it is always necessary that since comets is not a very, it is explode but it is not explode data regarding it, but still you can have every new comet is a new laboratory. You cannot say what happens inside it, what is happening, what
Yeah.
material is inside it. So you need to study every comet and then start putting it into the database for it. So you just keep on studying, study the variation, the trend of the, basically the trend of the molecular production rate based on the as a function of heliocentric distance.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So
thank you,
we
Arvind.
won't take much longer. Thank you so much, Arvind.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah. Thank you,
extremely
Arvind.
informative.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's very helpful actually.
Yeah, thank you.
thank you so much.
Okay, see you all later then.
See
Bye.
you.
Yeah.
Bye. Thank
Sure.
you so
Bye.
much.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you all.